Namaskar. We have a very distinguished speakers section today to speak on contemporary developments in Tibet and implications to India. Now, essentially, with the presence of the Standing Committee on Foreign Affairs member, Sri Janardhan Swami, and former Member of Parliament, Tabir Kaur, and other distinguished panelists, we have today a discussion on Tibet. And this is quite timely. We have the Prime Minister's visit expected somewhere on 22nd, 23rd this month to Beijing. Of course, there is no substantial input in terms of the Tibet policy or any other radical changes for the Tibet policy of India. Nevertheless, we would expect some incremental kind of decisions taken on the relations now, the border-related CBMs, confidence building measures. We also expect some kind of an understanding in terms of implementing the BDCA, if it is ever signed, Border Defense Cooperation Agreement between the two sides. The drafts are floating between New Delhi and Beijing, so we would expect some progress in that regard in terms of confidence building measures. But essentially, we come across these three propositions on Tibet, why Tibet is important for India. Number one, obviously, is part of the human security, human angle. We have over 160,000 Tibetan refugees in India. They wish to go back. They want to see major developments happening in Tibet, autonomy being implemented in Tibet. So this is one major issue of human security that we need to consider. Number two is stability of the border regions, which is on the uppermost of every other government so far in New Delhi. Third, basically, we see that with huge modernization efforts being carried out in Tibet, either in terms of road construction, railway construction, or airfields, or a host of other modernization efforts, we have seen the ecosystem being affected in Tibet, and the Trans-Himalayan ecosystem is now substantially under siege. His Holiness the Dalai Lama in WikiLeaks cable mentioned to the political officer in the US Embassy here that for the next 10 years, the Tibetan struggle will be focused mostly on the ecosystems, on environmental issues, on climate change issues in Tibet, Trans-Himalayan region. So this third issue is also one major aspect of the with impact from Tibet on the Indian security as a whole. We have had in 1954 a policy decision taken by the then Prime Minister Nehru on Tibet. We have also seen policy changes during Mr. Rajiv Gandhi's visit in 1988, as well as during Prime Minister Vajpayee's visit in June 2003. Essentially, we have Indian government had mentioned various policy options on the Tibet issue. In other words, the alternatives are quite visible now. We either support the Chinese position on Tibet, we support the Tibetan freedom, we support, we maintain status quo situation, or as it happens, when the 18-party Congress, Communist Party Congress, took place last November, and when President Xi Jinping made a comment to the PTI correspondent this March that the territorial dispute is highly complicated, one of the suggestions is that during his tenure, probably the territorial dispute will not be resolved till 2022, till the 20th Party Congress is held. With the suggestion that we now are in a very precarious situation on the territorial dispute if we do not have the mechanisms such as CBMs, confidence building measures, and so on and so forth. I was suggesting that some of the points raised were pretty good. There was the post-Dalai Lama situation, but mostly the people who are actually looking at post-Dalai Lama situation were actually the Chinese. No Tibetan person had mentioned about these post-Dalai Lama scenarios. But it struck me also that the Dalai Lama had made a speech about a couple of years ago about suggesting that he would discuss about this issue of a post-Dalai Lama situation some 14 years later down the line. So he must have perceived that he had this divine kind of message that he is going to last 14 more years, and had been in the best of his health, and would discuss about that situation later on. As far as the water treaty is concerned, China never signed any water treaty with any lower riparian state. Indus treaty is with Pakistan and India. It's not between China, India, Pakistan. So there's not been any with Irtysh River with Kazakhstan, the Brahmaputra Yalu Zampo with India, or Indus River with India and Pakistan. We have not also seen on the Irrawaddy River, Mekong River, Salween River, or Sumha River with Russia. Even with a stronger country like Russia, they have not been able to even resolve the bilateral problem on the water issue. So, with any lower riparian state, China had not signed any agreement. So, I think the lesson that we can learn is obviously we need to talk to the Chinese, and we have had 2 MOUs on water sharing, data, hydrological data exchange, but not a water treaty as such. Privately, the Chinese suggest that if India guarantees that this water will be used only for agricultural purposes, then possibly there could be an agreement between the 2 sides. But so far there has not been any proposal for a water treaty, because they have not signed with any other lower riparian state. Then we have also the asymmetric warfare as suggested by the army officer here, and I agree with that position. On the airfields, we have several airfields, not just Tejpur, Chagua, Hashimara in the, and then you have Leh, you have also the advanced landing grounds, Phukche, Nyoma, Daulat Beg Oldi, where recently, about a month ago or 2 months ago, the C-130Js have flown in that area, which means that we could probably mobilize troops in those regions. So it's not that we do not have any preparation. The strike corps formation, the various other measures are what India is trying to do. Overall, I felt that there's been a good discussion also on the political leadership and military leadership situation and their policies vis-a-vis India from China's point of view. One of the things I think we need to also factor in is the 156 monasteries in the Trans-Himalayan region will be in the transition period between China and India in the Tibetan transition period. I think these will also be crucial, as recently reports about these monasteries. There has been some Chinese pressure on these monasteries, so we will see probably the elections to these monasteries in terms of the head monks and other hierarchies in these monasteries. We need to look at carefully how the leadership changes in these monasteries. On broadly the military leadership, we have seen substantial defense budget being allocated in Tibet by China, and I think, as Mr. Swami mentioned, we should not go in for an arms race. We should look at it from the point of view of our own national interests. And here the asymmetric warfare actually counts. We cannot match dollar by dollar, but we have to look at some of those weaknesses in the Chinese defense allocations. For instance, there has been a lot of resistance from the Tibetans within Tibet and in Kham and Amdo regions, as the self-immolation attempts and previously the uprisings in Lhasa and other places have indicated. So this is one other factor that we need to keep in mind. when we look at the not matching the Chinese by force levels, but by looking at some of the weaknesses that China has in Tibet, which is Tibetans themselves, as the non-alignment 2.0 mentioned, of going beyond in case of the skirmishes between India and China.
I think 5 is more realistic.
We have, in terms of the India factor, number one, the ground reality is that the territorial dispute is not resolved, and this hangs in major ways, and we are spending a lot on this. The strike core, which would consume about 89,000 crores in the next 5 years' time, is a major factor. But of course, strike core will take a war inside China, not just in Tibet, but inside China. So we have also seen recent purchases with the United States, light artillery, Apache helicopters, the C-130Js, and a host of others, Su-30s, which are now stationed in Arunachal Pradesh. All these indicate that we are beefing up our defenses. As Mr. Swami mentioned, we also have to factor in the defensive portion and look at this issue in a more from a national security point of view. And overall, we have seen the Depsang Bulge incident as some kind of a military adventurism on the part of China, and that is where we ran through a script from April 15th to May 6th, when the 5 flag meetings took place. We have, for instance, the Prime Minister's comments, the Foreign Minister's comments, the Defense Secretary's comments, Raksha Mantri's comments in the Commanders' Conference in the interregnum. All these were according to a same script, if you look at closely, and we played up on the differences between the civilian and military leadership in China. Of course, we so far have not got an answer from China on why they have intruded into Depsang, but the Defense Secretary told the Standing Committee on Defense of the Parliament that the Chinese have moved in 19 kilometers. If that is the official position, then I think we need to also make a lot of preparations, including. But we were on the ground. The army as well as the ITBP had put up tents closer to the Chinese tents, and we have kind of sanitized the whole area during that incident. So we ran through a certain script. Finally, I think the whole the Tibet, China, India, I think what it indicates to is the Trans-Himalayan security region. Trans-Himalayan belt as a security concern. From a human point of view, from the ecology point of view, water issues have been raised. Also, glaciers melt down. This is going to be a major issue in the future, apart from the military security related issues. Supposing in a post-Dalai Lama situation, we have the TYC becoming more active in the region, it would have from Karakoram ranges up to the foothills of the Himalayas in Burma, India portions. The whole region will be activated, which the Chinese will have to think, which the Indians have to think about the entire belt, Trans-Himalayan belt, becoming pretty active from the political activism point of view. Of course, the Xinhua news agency in April 2008 said that TYC is the Al-Qaeda, but they have taken that to the extreme and probably, inciting the TYC, Tibet Youth Congress, into some kind of violence. But TYC constitution says non-violence, so there is no way Xinhua news agency's perspective will be fulfilled in terms of the Al-Qaeda. These are some points that I thought I should place together, but we had a very fruitful presentation as well as discussions in the room. I thank you very much for being present.
May, if you permit, just